You know, I've always wondered two things about horror games. One, why the fuck we pay money just to get scared? And two, even though we're all sitting safe and sound in our rooms, we're still getting scared. Like, deadass, think about it for a second. We spend our entire lives trying to avoid stress. We lock our doors, we install cameras and alarms, we dodge dark alleys in the middle of the night, cause like we saw what the fuck happened to Batman. But then we come home, and we sit in our comfortable chairs, we grab a drink, we make some snacks, and we spend 60, maybe like 70 now due to inflation, on a game designed to make us scared. A game designed to make our hands shake and keep us looking over our shoulder. I mean, to me personally, it just doesn't make sense. Why do we choose to be miserable? And again, why does it work? That's the paradox that we're stepping into. And from here, I'm going to try to guide you through the descent of the biological and psychological reactions you have to the tricks the developers use. Now, every horror game is kind of built on the same foundation, but what changes throughout all of them is how much they're willing to violate you, and how far they're willing to take it. Now, before you get jump scared or see any type of monster, the game has to mess with your head first. Ow, I just bit the fuck out of my tongue. So it puts you somewhere that already feels wrong. Maybe it's a school hallway, or like a mall with the lights on with nobody there. There's nothing you can directly point to that's scary, but something in your gut tells you like, this shit is weird. Now, since your brain is constantly wired to look for patterns, it starts searching for noise, movements, other people, literally anything to confirm that your surroundings are normal. But when you get back nothing but dead silence, your brain starts scrambling for something to grab onto, and it defaults to one of its most primitive survival tactics. In the wild, a huge reason our ancestors survived is because they were masters at pattern recognition. If you could spot a tiger's stripes through high grass, you had a very good chance of surviving. And now, our mind brings that same prehistoric desperation into the living room. It begins to autofill the void by stitching noises and visual things together until it becomes a threat that we can recognize. The white noise of a fan and the settling floorboards slowly start to turn into the phantom sound of a footstep. You start seeing faces in the wallpapers and silhouettes behind the trees because to your lizard brain, a false alarm is safer than you being caught off guard. This is why you can't unsee the monster in the corner once you've already spotted it. Your brain has officially categorized that random shadow as a threat to your life. So now the developers don't even have to show you a real monster. They just provide the visual static and let your own evolutionary paranoia finish the job. Now, not every developer violates your sense of reality in the same way. Some games like The Siege and Layers of Fear make the environment itself a trap. They know that your brain is constantly building a mental map of where you are, so they quietly rearrange things behind your back. You'll walk through a room, turn a corner, turn back to where you just came from, only to find the door that you just used isn't there anymore. In other games, they won't do any of that. The room stays exactly how you left it. And some can argue that's even a bit worse, because now your brain has nothing to react to. It has nothing to point at and say, hey, that's wrong. So now you're just left with a lingering, undirected anxiety. But no matter how different the approaches are, they're doing the exact same thing. They're breaking your ability to trust the space that you're in. One does it by constantly changing the environment, and the other does it by not changing anything at all. Either way, your brain switches from trying to understand and explain the environment it's in to treating it like it's a threat. And the second it does that, everything it was too preoccupied to notice starts to become much more apparent. Like the fog you were ignoring, or that one light bulb above your head that's steady flickering. The flashlight that used to illuminate more suddenly seems like it's not showing enough. Now, when you're that on edge, and the environment isn't trustworthy, and your mind is playing sensory tricks on you, just trying to make sense of everything, The next thing it can grab onto is the game mechanics. Think about it. In any other game, the controller is basically an extension of your body. You press a button, you jump, and it's almost instant. But in horror games, they intentionally make the character feel heavy. You know that nightmare we've all had where you're trying to run away from something, but your legs feel like they're made out of concrete. That's exactly what developers are aiming for here. When you jam the joystick forward trying to run away and your character stumbles or takes an agonizing second to start moving, it triggers a massive spike in panic. Your brain is screaming to go, but the game is saying not so fast. But after a while, you start to adapt to that clunkiness. You get used to the wait, you start to find a rhythm in the struggle, and you begin to trust the game's rules. And by this point in the game, you've been opening doors, looting chests, and triggering animations the whole time. And somewhere along the way, your brain decided those are okay. If I can't trust anything else, I can trust that I'm safe when I do this. And even that gets weaponized. Batman Arkham Knight isn't a fucking horror game, and it still used that. You spend hours grappling around the city without a second thought. It's second nature. It's how you get everywhere. And then out of nowhere, the game randomly slams Man-Bat into your face when you're grappling onto a fucking building. Why would you do that? Now, your brain doesn't know what to trust. It can't trust the environment because it's dark, it can barely see, or the environment may be shifting. And now, it can't trust the mechanics because you're randomly getting jump scared. And now you're in a state of hypervigilance. You're noticing everything. A floorboard creaking, a light flickering at the end of the hallway, stuff swirling just outside of your field of view. Shit that would have meant nothing earlier has your full attention now because of how wired your brain is. And that's the kind of fucked up part. The exhaustion doesn't come from the jump scares or the chase scenes. It builds up in the long, quiet gaps in between them. Your brain is just running worst case scenarios on loop the entire time, burning through your energy, trying to prepare for something that might not happen. No matter what you try, it just won't shut up. Because as long as there's a possibility of a threat, your mind refuses to let go. So by the time something actually does show up, you're already burnt out. So now, since the stage is already set, this is where the descent officially begins, and the experience chooses which part of your survival instincts it wants to turn against you. You know that involuntary reaction you get when you think you're alone, but then you hear a noise, so you fucking freeze? That's what games like Amnesia the Bunker and Alien Isolation live for. They intentionally trigger your freeze response, which is that primal reflex that locks your muscles into place to make you invisible to a potential predator. Usually this freeze is just a split-second pause button while your brain decides between fight or flight, but some horror games like to play dirty. They strip away the flight option entirely and make the only option available flight. They force you to exist in your own vulnerability. The power fantasy that we're used to having and playing with in other games is gone. We don't get to be some enhanced Spartan super soldier. We just get to be a guy with a dying camera. And when you're that lame and helpless, your ears are basically your only radar. You can barely see, you don't get to fight, so hearing is the only thing you have left. And the environmental noise was designed with that exactly in mind. There's always something dripping, creaking, or rattling off in the distance. It's never loud enough to react to or fully draw your attention, but it's not something that's quiet enough to ignore either. It just keeps you slightly paranoid the whole time. And specific games have the nerve to push it even further. I'm sure we've all experienced this when a sound just feels like it's keep getting closer and closer and closer, but it never actually arrives. Turns out we aren't crazy. That's a real thing called a shepherd's tone. It's the same sound cycling over and over, just tricking your brain into thinking something's getting closer. And your brain keeps waiting for it to actually arrive or go away, and it never does. In those type of games, that's usually what breaks most people. Not the jump scare or getting chased, it's the waiting. You stop trusting what you hear, you start second guessing every step, crawling in and out of the same locker just so you can catch your breath. For some games that's enough. They won't torture you any further. But for others, Those extra 3 minutes you spent frozen in the locker is where the genre takes a bit of a split. Most games will let you hide, but others turn that hesitation into a weapon. Take Alien Isolation for an example. They did this years ago. The xenomorph starts off manageable, but the longer you play, the more behaviors it learns, and it learns by watching you. What lockers you like to hide in, which routes you like to run. It's like a memorizing machine that's hunting you down, and based on that, it learns new behaviors and new ways to hunt you down throughout the story. Resident Evil Requiem took that idea and ran with it. The stalker isn't just memorizing where you've been, it's dead-ass thinking. It'll smash covers it's seen you use before, pull itself into the ceiling to cut off your escape routes, and when the creepy bitch loses you, she starts crying. And as creepy as it is, at least you know she's still out there. At a certain point, she stops crying, and that's somehow so much worse, because you have no idea if she's actually gone, or if she's just sitting in the vents waiting for you to make a noise. And if you do somehow find a way to slow it down, or make it trip over itself, it won't repeat the same mistake. So even when you think you're safe, you're probably not. It's just waiting and watching. Anyway, eventually, the survival horror genre all leads to the same spot. No matter what tactic they use, you eventually land at the same spot. The chase music kicks you in your fucking chest before you even seen what's chasing you down, and you just move on instinct before your brain has consciously figured out what's going on. The thing you've been trying to avoid this whole time has finally found you, and you have no choice but to run. Now the next level of this descent is action horror, and in some ways it's worse than where we came from, because at least in survival horror, you knew you were helpless. But here, you start off with that same vulnerability, but then they hand you a weapon. They allow you to fight back, and that somehow makes everything worse. From the moment you load in, the audio is already going to work. The ambient music puts you on edge immediately, because buried deep down in the sounds, and I know it sounds kinda crazy, but deep down in the sounds are distorted animal groans, low enough that you won't consciously notice them, but present enough to start teasing your fight or flight instincts before anything has actually happened. Then you get a weapon, and the moment you pick it up, your internal chemistry pulls a complete 180. You're no longer helpless, and your brain instantly registers that shift in power. It starts flooding your system with adrenaline. So now, you finally start moving with confidence instead of desperation. And the game makes sure that confidence feels earned. You get more than enough resources to feel prepared, and when the first enemy shows up, the combat music kicks in. It's aggressive, it's loud, and it feels good. Your first fight goes exactly how you hoped it would. Enemies die fast, you have plenty of ammo left over, and you barely took any damage. Whatever had you anxious until then, you start to realize it was nothing. But that confidence isn't yours. It's rented. Those early enemies were built to die fast enough to make you feel capable. The further you get, the more durable they become. And that same combat music that had you feeling unstoppable is still playing. It's still loud and aggressive, but now you're not winning as easily. And here's the thing about that music. Sound gets processed in the brainstem, the same part that controls your heart rate and breathing. So your brain has no choice but to sync to the tempo. And as the tempo climbs, your heart rate climbs with it. So when you were winning, it felt like fuel. It pumped you up. But now that you're not winning as easily, it's starting to make your hand shake. But when you're that amped up, mistakes don't slow you down. They accelerate you. Overcommitment feels decisive. Reloading early feels cautious, and mag dumping into an enemy that's already dead feels thorough. The adrenaline turns every error into a reasonable overreaction, and every overreaction spikes the adrenaline higher. Your hands shake more, and the whole cycle keeps feeding itself. But once you run out of enemies, the room just goes silent. The ambient music creeps back in, and your adrenaline slowly starts to settle. That's when the reality of what just happened catches up to you. You open your inventory, and you see what the fight actually cost you. The bullets dumped on instinct, and the meds you used without really needing to. And you realize the number of your supplies is way lower than it should be. Every bullet you spent feeling invincible becomes a debt because you never have enough resources to feel comfortable, only enough to get you through the next fight. So every missed shot, every panicked reload, every extra bullet you fired just to be sure becomes a problem for the future you. Every slight mistake pushes you closer to a dead end. Now the game can build this dead end in two different ways. For some, it's the fixed difficulty. In titles like the original Resident Evils, the scarcity is baked into the game. Every resource is set in stone. If you waste a clip within the first hour, that debt follows you for the rest of the run because the game won't pity you and give you any extra ammo to make up for it. Newer games use a more adaptive difficulty. The game watches you and monitors your performance in real time. If you're playing too efficiently, the pressure tightens, you get fewer supplies, and threats start appearing exactly where you felt safe. If you make more mistakes, then the game will pity you and give you more supplies and pull back on the enemies. Either way, it always has a hand on the dial. But no matter what route the game chooses, adaptive or fixed difficulty, even if you manage every bullet perfectly, some developers take it a bit further. Now, while most action horror games let you rely on the instinct you have, the instinct and training we've developed over the years, some branch off and use it against you. We've spent years knowing that a headshot is an instant kill. That's basic gaming law. But then games like Dead Space come along and force you to ignore that. They make you aim for the flailing limbs and not the head. But by the time your brain finally overrides this muscle movement, you've already panic dumped half a mag into an enemy's fucking skull and nothing happened. But whether the game decides to leave your instincts alone or not, eventually you adapt. You're a gamer. Of course you do. Whatever weak spots they have, they become familiar. The animations get predictable and your rhythm starts to stabilize. And right when you do, right when you get into that zone, they drop a new enemy type, specifically designed to invalidate the rhythm you just found. Your brain can't rely on autopilot anymore, which sends you spiraling back to square one. Your pulse spikes, the adrenaline loop restarts, and suddenly you're fumbling with controls like it's your first time playing. Alright. I know I've been hitting you with a lot. We've descended through the physical wreckage of your nervous systems, so you might be feeling a bit overwhelmed with information. Feel free to pause the video and take a breather. Go refill your snacks, go grab another drink, take a leak if you have to, do whatever you gotta do. I'll wait here for a second. But don't forget to come back. You back? Alright, good. Take a second and notice how you feel right now. That breath you just took, that quiet, calm feeling in your chest. That drop is what safe rooms are meant to create. When you step into one, the shift is immediate. The door closes and the room shuts out the chaos outside. It's almost jarring how fast everything switches. Whatever music that was clawing at your nerves a second ago melts into something slower and steadier. And almost instantly your body relaxes with it. Your breathing slows, your shoulders relax, and it actually feels okay here. That's not an accident. It's all very intentional. Fear and anxiety can't stay at its peak forever. The developer's biggest issue isn't making you scared, it's your biological limit. If a game just screams in your face for 3 hours straight, you wouldn't stay terrified. You just become desensitized within the first 10 minutes. Don't mistake this kindness, this safe room for generosity. They're not being nice. They're just cooling down your lizard brain, so when you finally leave the safe room and step back into the chaos, the next scare hits you with full force. Up until now, every layer of horror has been about taking control away from you. This layer does the exact opposite. It hands it back. In games like Until Dawn or the Walking Dead Telltale series, the story is just a mirror of your own split-second decisions. The game makes that clear very early on. Your choices shape everything. A single snide remark can tilt a relationship forever. This isn't like other games where you're just trying to survive to the next checkpoint. Here, there is no safety in the script. If a character dies, they stay dead. There is no clean reload to polish a mistake out of existence. Any sort of failure isn't a game over, it's just canon. It's not like the developers give you one big decision to make every now and again. They make you pick constantly. You're making micro decisions so often that by the time the nightmare actually peaks, the disaster feels like a personal consequence rather than a scripted event. Then the pressure spikes even more, and this is where the narrative genre usually branches in two different directions. On one side, you have the social pressure of games like The Walking Dead. Here, the clock is purely mental. A timer appears, options flash on the screen, and you have 5 seconds to decide what matters most. If you hesitate and that bar burns out, the game treats your silence as a decision, and the group will remember that you had nothing to say when it mattered the most. But then you have the physical pressure of games like Until Dawn. They take that same mental anxiety and anchor it directly into your body. A don't move prompt pops up and turns your controller into a tripwire, forcing you to physically lock your muscles while something stalks past your hiding spot. If your hands shake even a little, the sensor trips, the silence breaks, and your character will probably die. But despite how different these approaches are, they're both chasing the exact same reaction. They want to make you fold under the pressure. Maybe it's a timer draining while two characters beg you for help. Or maybe you can't button mash hard enough to save your friend. But whatever choice you make in that panic will come back to bite you in your ass. Because in most horror games, mistakes are temporary. You die, you reload a checkpoint, you try again. Your friends die, you reload a checkpoint, you try again. But these games don't rewind for you. The story simply adapts to whatever version of events you created and carries that reality forward like it was always meant to happen. And at first, you don't notice anything, but eventually you start noticing the gaps. A character who used to be a part of the group just isn't there anymore. A conversation that could have helped you never happens, and a relationship that would have grown never gets the chance to. The world keeps moving like nothing is missing, but you can tell that something is. And once that thought settles in, it's hard to not start replaying the moments that caused it. Maybe you hesitated too long, maybe you picked the wrong name, maybe your hand slipped during a panic. But whatever happened in that moment, you're now stuck living in the outcome. And here's the dirtiest part of the trick. Half the time, the outcome was already decided. Sometimes the difference is purely cosmetic, but it doesn't really matter because it all felt like it was your fault. And that's the real trap. The real fear in this genre doesn't come from monsters or fear necessarily. It comes from the weight of being responsible for what happens. You were afraid of being the kind of person who makes the wrong calls. And under enough pressure, you were. Now we've reached the final floor. Every layer of horror we've descended through so far has more or less stayed focused on your character. Narrative games let that tension leak out a little bit by making your own decisions a part of the story. But at the end of the day, it's all still a game behind glass. Now some developers aren't just satisfied with that tiny leak. They want to breach. They don't care to just scare your avatar. They want to reach through the screen and mess with your reality. So what happens when the game stops pretending that you're separate from it? On the final floor of this descent, the game has officially outgrown the screen, and now it's looking for the person holding the controller. This is a rare, specialized subgenre of horror that uses a tool most developers don't usually touch. You feel safe because you know there's a physical screen between you and the monster. This is the protective frame that keeps your lizard brain from actually calling the police. Imagine you're mid-game, and suddenly your volume bar for your TV appears on your screen and actually slides down to 0. You grab your remote, but it doesn't work. Games like Eternal Darkness like to do things like that to mess with you. Or imagine a game that stops scaring the guy on the screen and starts digging for the person behind it. You're playing something like Doki Literature Club, and suddenly the character isn't talking to your avatar anymore. They're calling you by your actual Windows username. They're breaking through the fourth wall and looking you right in your eye. It's the ultimate breach of the safe simulation, and it forces you to ask one question we've been avoiding since the first 60 seconds of this video. Why the hell do we invite this into our homes in the first place? Honestly, after breaking all of this down, if you enjoy horror games, you're a bit weird. Like seriously, think about it. We just spent all this time dissecting how developers hack our biology, and the conclusion is basically that we're paying for the privilege of a safe midlife crisis. We're the only species on the planet that took our biological alarm system, meant to keep us alive, and said, yeah, I'd like to pay $70 to trigger that again. But on to why it works. There's actually a term for this. It's called benign masochism. It's the ability to enjoy fear, stress, or even pain as long as some part of you knows you're safe. You masochistic freak. You freaky fuck. Since your brain knows it's a game the entire time, you know you're safe. But your instincts don't know the difference between real and fake, and that's what's getting taken advantage of. So the next time you're sitting in that comfortable chair, $70 lighter, hand shaking, at least you know why now. So I want to know, which level of horror do you like the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into anything, hit subscribe. The next time you find yourself walking down a dark hallway, hand shaking, barely able to breathe, just remember, you chose this. You invited the nightmare in. And I think the most terrifying part isn't the creatures that they create or how well they hack our biology. It's how much we enjoy having it happen to us.